Much for joining us here today for Dragonblade Authors Unplugged. We're here today with this week's authors. I've got Chantry, Dawes, and Everley, Gregg. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us this week.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, excited to be here.
Great. I'm really excited to talk about the books this week. We'll start with Chantry because your book released on Tuesday, and it's the first book in a brand new series and your first book with Dragonblade. Is that right?
It is my first book with Dragonblade. Yes, I'm very excited about that.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit? Thoroughly in Love, which is
called Thoroughly in Love. Yeah, it's a historical Regency romance, and it's a play on the name of the thoroughbred horse. And when this is a new genre for me. So when I was doing my research into Regency, I was looking to see what was going on in Regency. And being a horsewoman of, I'm not going to say how many years because I'm a grandma, but I was really excited to see that this was the birth of the thoroughbred racehorse, the cross-country horse, the steeplechase horse. So they were not originally called thoroughbreds. They were called thoroughly bred horses.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so that's where I got the title from, and all the different titles in the next few books will all be thoroughly something, captivated, besotted, whatever. But that's the history of it, and I wove that into the story. Aldby Park is an actual place where the first Arabian came.
I've got to stop you. You have to introduce us because
this is a little puppy I just adopted, and his name is Joey. He's a little nut, and he just woke up. So anyway.
What a sweetie who seems to like burrowing in your hair. So.
Yes, he does, and chewing on my ears. I just have to keep him away from the horses because he'll get stepped on.
Oh, no doubt. He's tiny.
Yeah.
He's tiny. So the series is Aldby Park?
Aldby Park.
Aldby Park.
Which is an actual place where the first Arabian came from the Arabian Empire. And it was bred with the big carriage horses in England to get a more refined riding horse. And that was the birth of the thoroughbred horse. So it's I kind of wove a little mystery, a little murder in there, and lots and lots and lots of romance.
Cool. Can you tell us a little bit about your hero and heroine?
My heroine is, I kind of like to call her every woman. She's not the young girl. She's a widow. She's got 3 daughters, and she's been left with this horse estate with all these thoroughbred horses that her husband, who has died, and I won't go into that because I don't want to give it away, but he's left her with all these horses to take care of and train and sell, and left her terribly in debt. So it's up to her to try to keep this going. But in that time period, in the early 1800s, women did not train horses. They did not breed horses. They weren't even allowed into the auctions to sell their horses. So she has to figure out a way to save her estate, provide for her daughters. And in comes Alexander Hawk, who is returned from war. And he's there to collect a debt on horses he sold to her husband. And he's mistaken for a stable boy because she's desperate to find some help because no one will work for her in the stables. And she puts him in there, and he's kind of like, what's going on? And I'm going to go along with this because what happened to my friend? Why is he dead? And why does she not have any money? She should have plenty of money. Look at all these horses. And little by little, he helps her solve the mystery of her dead husband and what's been going on. There's a lot of intrigue there with the horses being poisoned and things like that. So their love of horses brings them together. And she sees in him a good man and a kind man who her husband was not. And together they bring that estate right back to what it was and even better. And I have a lot about Tattersall's, which is the biggest horse auction in the world.
Oh, and how she there.
Yeah. And how she manages to get in there as a woman and sell her horses.
Wow.
So it's got some horse stuff in it.
So as somebody who knows very little about horses and knows nothing about Tattersall, can you guys tell us about it?
Tattersall's was the preeminent place to go sell the better bred horses in London. It was not a place to sell a cart horse or a wagon horse. This was to sell the gentleman's horses, or the best team of very gorgeous not wagon, I shouldn't say that, to pull your phaeton or your carriage in Hyde Park. You wanted a good looker. So these were the best
horses.
Yeah, these were the best of the best. And women had to wait outside, and they were not even allowed in the building. So sometimes their husband or somebody would purchase a horse for them, and it was not suitable at all. And of course, women had to ride side saddle. So who trained that horse to have a side saddle on it and flapping skirts on it? Someone had to do it, because women actually got killed quite a lot from side saddles. So, but anyway, she actually gets the other women of the ton together to help her sell them, because they all realize that they need a horse that's been trained by a woman for a woman. So
that makes sense.
And the Duke of Leeds helps her. He's realizes her worth and her talent. So
Awesome. Well, it sounds really interesting, and it sounds like there's a very satisfying happily ever after, plus a lot of other stuff in there too. So.
Oh yeah, and then we'll see the love stories of her daughters too, because they're all characters. Yeah.
Oh, good. Then we get to see the whole family. I love books like that where you get to revisit the people that you've seen before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So, Everley, your book is the Earl and the Lily.
Yes.
And it's the third book in the Forgotten Flowers of Flanders.
Yes. And this particular location, and maybe not the time period, but the location where I've set the series is kind of different from your Regencies or your Scottish romances. But it's a part of the world and a part of history that I've been fascinated with ever since I was 8 years old. So this series has actually been growing as a little seed in my head since I was like 8 years old. It's Flanders, which is what is now France and Belgium and the Netherlands. And that's where it's set. Throughout the series, the cornerstone figures are the Duke Philip of Burgundy, Philip III, and his wife, Isabella. And I did a lot of research on both of those characters and literally picked them up off the page and brought them to life. And in this third book, my heroine, Lisbeth, is a manuscript illuminator. She is the artist that decorates this tiny little books of hours that were carried around by women during the 15th century, mostly 13th and 14th century and 15th century. And so she's an artist, and she is working in the studio of a master. And as you might imagine, the master painter had a lot of political influence and a lot of influence over anyone and anything that he wanted. So she falls in love with him, becomes his mistress, but now it's been 7 years. So Lisbeth is 28. And in 15th century, 28 is approaching old maidhood. Mm-hmm. So he's tired of her. She decides she needs a new start. Meanwhile, she keeps getting these letters from the Queen Isabella, or Duchess Isabella, saying, I know you are an illegitimate daughter of the Duke, and I'm trying to gather together all the illegitimate daughters of the Duke and give them a decent start in life. Please come to Coudenberg. And she eventually goes to Coudenberg to work for him, and in steps the Earl. Earl Davian Price is English. Now, the English and the French, or the Burgundians, were like at war. Mm-hmm. But Davian becomes friendly with the Duke, and the Duke invites him to come and be the overseer for his manuscripts illumination. He had a large library that he was building in his castle at Kudenberg. This is all fact. This is all historical fact.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, all of it is based in history. I'm a real stickler for historical accuracy. So now we have this young Davian Price who is like 21 and never been kissed, sort of. And we've got Lisbeth, who is, she's an old maid. And sparks fly, and that's how the romance begins on very rocky ground, especially since Davian has a condition which is called glass delusion. That actually existed. The elite in that time period had this notion that if they were so afraid of losing their wealth and their status and their power, that they felt like they were made of glass. And so they physically convinced themselves that they could shatter at any moment. There was actually one person who, one of the kings, strapped a pillow to his butt to sit down. And so, it's a rather obscure disease, but it's a mental condition, and this is what Earl Davian Price has. And meanwhile, Lisbeth is like, what is wrong with you? More or less. So that's how the romance develops, and they have quite a interesting journey in developing that romance, because Davian is her boss, and he's very critical of her work, and her work is her passion, and it's all she has.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That also explains where the as breakable as glass line comes from your tagline, because I wanted to ask you about that. That's I love the tagline for that, and I wondered whether that was connected to the illumination part. But that's very cool.
That is
well.
cool.
It does tie together at the end. There is a tie together between. I mean, stained glass was a form of illumination, and they have to find the root of Davian's phobia, or whatever you want to call it, and it has to do with stained glass.
Wow.
That's interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's interesting that both of the heroines of your books are older this week, that they're not some just coming out kind of, young thing.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to read about women who have lived a little bit more.
Yeah, and this is more of a instead of very often you have an older hero and a younger heroine. Well, we switched it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. And also a hero with a mental challenge too, which is something we don't get to read about often, and would be nicer to see represented more often, because I think that's I
had never heard of it, and when I started researching to develop my character, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's too off the wall, and I was kind of afraid that the editor was going to say, this is kind of off the wall, but she's like, oh my God, this is so awesome. It's real, and I love it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because we all deal with something. It's nice to read about people who deal with things too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love books. I love historical books where you can count on the author to deliver on the historical accuracy, particularly because I don't remember things very well, which is something I probably shouldn't say on camera, but I don't remember things very well if I don't write them down. And so like dates and things and historical events disappear for me unless I've attached them to a story. So I love it when I can read a book and fall in love with a character and learn about a different time period and learn about a different way of living, and trust that the author has done their work. Can you talk, I know Everley, you said that was important to you. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of research that you did?
Oh my goodness. I've been researching that period of the Middle Ages in that location, believe it or not, since I was 8 years old. I came across a color plate in a book called the Neverlandish Painting that fascinated me, and it started a lifelong quest into researching medieval life in Flanders. I don't know why. I have no idea why. But the obsession took me through a master's program, and it took me actually to a serendipitous trip to Belgium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I got to walk in the cathedral where this artist, it just was amazing, absolutely amazing. So it has been a lifelong thing, and I feel like I lived then, and so I feel like I have roots there, and that's why I wanted to write this series. And at first, Catherine was like, usually they're set in Scotland or England. And I was like, yeah, well, maybe because there's none set here, maybe people would be interested. And then I did do a lot of research on Duke Philip and on his wife, Isabella. And Isabella has literally become like an icon for me. And if you just read in the history books, she's mentioned here and there, but I've read her biographies, I've read a lot about her, and she becomes like this matronly figure who is willing to take in the bastard children.
I was going to ask about that because you said that she was gathering the daughters to try and give them a start. A decent start.
Had a what did the priests call it? Something of the flesh. He had a weakness of the flesh. Wow. And he had 23 documented illegal children.
I think that surpasses weakness.
And countless undocumented. So I thought, well, man, I could write about all these women who have been forgotten, these forgotten flowers.
Yeah.
Daughters of the Duke. And
that's so interesting. Yeah. See, I've looked at the title of your series tons and tons and tons of times and never put that together. So I love that.
Yeah. So that's the theme. And there's plenty of other illegal daughters out there. So
But Isabella actually did that, actually acted as a mother figure to all of the.
Only in my imagination. Okay. But she was an extremely gracious woman, and an extremely what's the word? She was accepting of her station in life, and she wanted these girls to have a better chance at finding true love than she did. Because the sad truth is, and this is documented, that Isabella married the Duke out of convenience, and there was never any love lost between them. So I brought her to life and gave her a personality.
Cool. Very cool. Chantry, can you talk? You said that you're a horse person, which is very cool. I love to ride, and I almost never get a chance to do that. And that this was a new genre for you. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your research process and the things that you did to get ready to write the book and to write the genre?
Yeah, well, I'm from Colorado, which is pretty much horse country. People have horses like we have dogs and cats. So it's just become a way of life. And as a single mom, it was a way to support my 4 boys. So
you have 4. I have 3.
Yeah, I have 4 and I have a grandson.
Oh my goodness. All the testosterone all the time.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I've always been intrigued by horses throughout history. Just absolutely fascinated by their impacts, of course, such a huge impact throughout history. And I used to write Westerns, Western historicals. And then, of course, I did. I was in another genre for years and years and years as a ghostwriter for someone that I shall not name because I think I'm not allowed to. But anyway, when I was doing the research in the Regency genre, I came across Lady Letitia Lade, who was a woman who was about 6 foot tall. She was a previous prostitute. and she married a lord, and she became the Marchioness of Salisbury. And she had a terrible foul mouth, but she could outrace any man in the ton, and everyone came to love her and actually just looked beyond, her language, because she was such a good horse rider and carriage driver. And she was just wildly outrageous for the time, absolutely outrageous. And she plays a big part in giving Lady Amelia Darley the courage to go out there as a woman in the man's world. And she's right there with her. And Alexander Hawke actually knows Lady Lade and encourage her to also help her. And nobody shuns her. She was an ex-prostitute and everybody knew it. But somehow she was welcomed within society, even going to balls, was a great friend of the Prince Regent, because he was a huge horse lover. So like Everley said, just you go into history and pretty much you can find the most fascinating facts and the most fascinating people, and the story just explodes in your mind, and you just have to get it down on paper. And that's how this was for me. Just reading about the actual place of Albany Park and the actual Darley family and the Arabians that came over from the Ottoman Empire and Arabia, and Alexander's Hawks going there and finding Arabs to bring back to create these thoroughly bred horses, and him stumbling upon the Darley family at Albany Park. And there's Lady Lade, which is also that's her name. And that's a funny name for her character, being an ex-prostitute. So
Yes.
yeah.
Unfortunate coincidence.
Yes. But she was quite the daredevil. She would race her phaeton in Hyde Park, and she would steeplechase with the men, and she was unbeaten. So I think they probably had to accept her because they were afraid of her too.
Well, it's interesting how some characters in history can get away with things that other people would never even try. And there's a certain amount of boldness, I think, that's required to move past, some of that. So
Yeah.
So it sounds like both of your stories are very character driven, that you get the characters and the characters come very much alive to you. Can you talk a little bit about your writing process? Do you get the story the whole way? Do you plot for a long time ahead of time, or do you mostly write your way through it?
I do so much research, and as I'm doing research, I'm just taking copious notes. And out of those notes, I start actually plotting. And then I just do my whole outline. And the outline just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I try to stay within my outline so that I can write faster, but things always change. And it just, it has a life of its own when I start writing. So where I've gotten into trouble before as ghostwriting, I just kind of go out on my own. And I think it always has when you write from your heart, I think it's the best way to go, instead of trying to stay formulaic in an outline.
Mm-hmm.
I am jealous of you able to outline, because I am not an outliner. I will do the research and take notes and notes and notes and notes, and I have all of these things, and then all of a sudden the idea, the characters jump off the page, and I'm like, okay, what's the plot here, guys? What's the problem? And so I have to tuck it away, sleep on it a little while, and I come up with the end.
Yeah.
And then I just put the characters on the page and I let them go at it. And so I'm a pantser, and that makes it sometimes extremely difficult, because I know where it's going to end up, but I have to figure out how to get there.
Have you written yourself into corners before where you've had to backtrack?
God, yes. What usually happens, fortunately, is that I'll have the scene pop in my head, and I'm like, but they're not there yet. It's okay. Write the scene. I have these two little voices in my head. Okay, I'll write the scene. So I write the scene, and I'm like, well, where is that going to go? So I put it in the miscellaneous file. And then
so you write out of order.
Oh, yeah.
I have a girlfriend who does that. I'm always so envious of her, because she
it's like a puzzle.
Section is huge. Yeah.
like a puzzle. And then I'll be writing along, and then I'll go, I wrote this scene. Plug it in. Yeah.
And then your word count gets to jump like big chunks. I like that part.
Yes, it does. So
I don't think I could do that, Everly. I have on my outline graph, I have different points in the story so that it helps me kind of flow. But I also have specific characteristics of each character. So if I start getting out of sync, I'll forget that my character has this habit or that habit. So I try to stay very true to the little idiosyncrasies of the character, but also try to follow my, here's the different bridge that I have to make to get to the end with these different tiny scenes that I've got in my head. But I've found when I get really out of whack, I just lose my way with how the characters have to interact with each other. So
I envy you. I have tried outlining. I really have, but it's like my creative muse just goes, are you kidding me? Don't put me in a cage. This has to come naturally. And
yeah, it does. It really does. But I think I got with ghostwriting, you had to put out so many words in such a short time. You had to get very efficient, which sometimes I think killed the story. So I love writing for Dragonblade now because I feel like I don't have to rush and I can write better.
Well, I can't wait to read your book. As soon as we get off of here, I'm going to go download
I want to read yours.
All right.
So, Everly, I love where you're sitting, and you said that was your office behind you?
Yes, this is my office, and I don't know if you can see, but on top of the fireplace, there are all sorts of medieval things. Those tapestries I actually bought in Bruges, Belgium, and there's just all this medieval stuff, and I have a painting over there, a print over there, and I surrounded myself with the place where I feel at home.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Do you write in your office most of the time? Is that where you like to write?
Yes. The only book I ever wrote there were two books that I had to write sort of on location. I had never been to a certain location in the winter, and the final scene took place in a snowstorm. So I had to go there and rent a hotel room and write the last scene there. But most of the time it's right here in this office. This is my place, and this is where I also use background music. I
do too.
I listen to like Celtic music or medieval type music in the background, instrumental to set the mood.
Just to help you get into the story. That makes sense.
Yeah. Quiet, slow, romantic music for those scenes, and then any very upbeat music when I love it.
When I've had a war scene or a fight scene, a good friend of mine, she goes, Assassin's Creed. I guess it's a video game.
It's a video game.
And her son plays this video game. She goes, you got to download the soundtrack for Assassin's Creed. It'll be perfect for your battle scenes. And she was right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That comes from downstairs in the bottom of my house quite often.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the boys, right?
Yep.
But it's so funny when you said you're a horse person. I just came rushing home from the barn.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm a horse person as well.
Are you? That's so cool. Wonderful. Yeah, I sit here and I work on my table. I have a 12-foot long table here that is just strewn with all my printed off notes, but I have it where I can look out on the pastures and watch my horses.
Very lucky that you can do that. I have to board mine out. But you know what? You and I, being that, even though we write in slightly different places or parts of history, I need to interview you on my blog and then we need to swap interviews, because I think it would be, I know my readers would be interested in reading about you and your book.
Oh, wonderful. I would love that.
Okay. It's cool, the similarities between the two of you, even with the difference in the time periods. You know, with heroines that are a little bit more established in horses and everything. It's very. It's
So what is
interesting
that?
time.
Yours is what, 18th century?
Yeah, mine is Regency, so early 1800s.
Okay. Yeah, I'm about 400 years before that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ladies, it's been so nice to talk to you today. We are running right up against the end of time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It was
you.
great to
so
learn
happy.
more about the books.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
And you're gonna be hearing from me, Chantry.
Very good.
Okay.
Good. Please do.
I will pop the link to the books in the comments if you don't have them already, you need them. It's the perfect weekend reading. And so you'll be able to grab them right there if you haven't grabbed them already. And we will see you back here same time next week.
Very
Thanks
good.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.